Hello and welcome to this edition of the Her Success podcast. We are the podcast that interviews highly successful females within the engineering and tech world with hope of inspiring the next generation of leaders in this space. This podcast is brought to you by Athenahealth. Athenahealth is a leading recruiter within engineering and technology. If you are an engineer looking for your next position, or you're a hiring manager looking to hire engineers, please get in touch. On this episode, we interview Anuja Gokhale. Anuja is the Vice President of Engineering at Payscale, who are an industry leader in compensation data. We talk on today's episode about how companies can get compensation right. We also explore the state of the US tech market following a brutal 6 months of constant layoffs. What lessons should we learn from this? How can companies scale more sustainably in the future? It's a great episode. I hope you guys enjoy. Let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Her Success podcast. Today, I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Anuja Gokhale. Anuja is the Vice President of Engineering at Payscale. They're an industry leader in the compensation data and technology field. Prior to that, Anuja held various senior leadership roles at a number of household name companies, including Chewy, athenahealth, and ADP. I'm really excited to dive into her background and learn a bit more about her journey. But Anuja, thank you so much for being on the podcast and welcome.
Happy to be here. Like I said, this particular topic is something that's near and dear to my heart. So happy to chat about it anytime.
Excellent. Well, good. I'm really excited to dive into your background and talk through some of these topics. First things first, I'd love to just hear a bit of an overview of your background and where you've come from and how your career has moved over the last few years.
Yeah, so I think in some ways, I would say my career path has been fairly typical of someone who is, I guess, in my role right now. So I started off as a developer years ago, actually came to this country to do my master's in computer science. Had decided years ago when I was in elementary school, this is what I wanted to do. I wrote my first program, got hooked onto it. It's something that I've always been really interested in doing. But as I started to work as a developer, fairly soon after I got my master's in computer science, I went back for an MBA. And the reason being, I've always been interested in where the two meet. As someone once told me a very long time ago, you can build a great product, but if there's nobody using it, there's no value in it. And the other way around, you can have a great market, but if you have a product that doesn't scale or doesn't work very well, it's useless in so many ways. So for me, that particular intersection between good engineering and a business that grows and thrives has been really important to me. But after that, I actually went back, worked as a developer at a couple of places. Started off at a small startup called NobleNet, which got acquired by RogueWave. But really, starting off with a startup that let me get my hands into all kinds of things was super important because it gave you both the ability as well as the flexibility to pick up something, raise your hands and say, I don't know it, but I'm going to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And it worked. But then as I moved through a couple of roles, I would say in some ways I kind of accidentally fell into leadership. Becoming a manager was not, frankly, an explicit goal for me. But I realized that I was doing all the things that a manager would do just because we were a smaller, more nimble place. And at some point, I had my VP of engineering ask me if I wanted to be a manager. And at that point, my answer really was, as long as I can still be technical, right? I didn't want to just give that up. It seemed to work. I think it's frankly something I've enjoyed through my career, being able to kind of have my feet in both. I still really valued the technology side, but then also be able to grow teams, to coach teams, to engage teams, and to really build teams and engage. That I really, really believe that when you build teams that are engaged, that act as owners, is where you can build the best products, right? And where you actually have people who would stay for a longer time because they can see the value of what they build.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And I think that point of being the kind of hands-on leader, I think no matter who you are and no matter how senior you are up the ladder, staying hands-on, whether it's in the technical field or in sales when you're hands-on to your customers or whatever the case may be, it's so crucial because that's the link that you need, even if you are managing a relatively big team. And I think it's an interesting point you made earlier about the intersection between the engineering side and almost the commercial acumen and that ability to get a commercially viable product. Obviously, we work in the recruitment world, and so many of our customers, that seems to be the secret sauce. Like, there's a lot of people that can sit down and produce some fantastic code, but do people have the commercial acumen and the customer eye to be able to build something that is commercial and understand the business impact behind what they're doing? Tell us about your role at Payscale. What did it look like when you first came to the company? Why did you decide to join Payscale, and what's that journey looked like over the last 18 months?
Yeah, sure. So I joined Payscale in December of 2021. And in some ways, this was coming back to the domain I had worked with years and years ago. So I was at ADP and Workscape, which is the same human capital management domain. I'd built similar software for years, obviously a domain that's kind of close to my heart, if you will. But I think the other thing really was that as I was looking for my next role from where I was, in so many ways, I wasn't really looking for a change when I made the move, right? At that point, the CTO of the company was someone that I had talked to a couple of years ago, back before Payscale and PayFactors merged, if you will, had stayed in touch with him. I actually interviewed there at PayFactors years ago. Loved the people. It just wasn't the right role at the time, and so I didn't take it, but I really loved who I talked to, loved the mission of the company. And then 2.5, 3 years later, when I spoke to them again, it was the right role, but I already knew I liked what the company was doing. I liked the people that I talked to. And to me, those are equally important parts of why I look for where I go to next. Because you spend so much of your time at work or with your work colleagues. It's important for me to feel like these are people I can work with well, that we work as a team, but that also we are building something that it has value, that I can relate to, right? And in so many ways, what Payscale does is a mission that I can relate to, that I can actually, put my effort behind and go, I can see the impact that it has on people's lives, right? Started here, again, like I said, I started here fairly soon after Payscale and PayFactors merged, about a year from the merger. And then just before I joined, we had just acquired a company in Scotland, actually, called Curocomp. So joined when we had just all, we had the merger, the acquisition had just taken place, and we were now trying to merge all of these different products, technologies, teams, right? Kind of figuring out not just what our path was going forward, but then how we would actually marry all that we had together to make it the most efficient that we could. Currently at Payscale, I have teams that work on multiple products. So we work on some large B2B enterprise products. Like I have a market pay product, but I also work with the compensation planning product, with our pay equity product, as well as with our tier 2 support teams and our platform teams. And our platform teams are really our DevOps engineers, our DBA teams, our kind of Tableau admin. So it's a fairly wide range in terms of both the products, but also the functions. But I think to me, that's what keeps me the most engaged is having that broad mix, if you will.
Yeah. When I was reading a lot about the organization, it really aligns pretty well with our mission and her success. It's something that, like you said, I imagine a lot of the people that work for the organization is more than just building any product. There really is a fundamental mission behind what you guys are doing. Can you tell us a bit about the organization and what their mission looks like?
They're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right that for a lot of people working here, the mission is what keeps people here in so many ways. And at a high level, our goal really is to help get pay right, if you will, right? But to do that, we our real mission is to transform both the efficiency and the equitableness of the compensation industry by providing a combination of the best data, software, and services, right? So it's not just a product company. We try and combine the data we have as well as services that go with it in the end to be able to give people the power and the knowledge that they need to be able to make the best compensation decisions. So we have the B2B side that does that. We also have a B2C side where people like you and me can go to Payscale and say, how much should I get paid based on my experience, my skills, where I'm located. So it's really being able to empower everyone to be able to get compensation right from both ends of the stick, if you will.
Interesting. I always think if you look at like software engineering as an example, it can be quite a challenging thing to price like a software engineer, because you can have one software engineer with 10 years experience that does this, and you can have another software engineer with 10 years experience that can do this. And those can be very, very different. How do you guys combat that? And almost, I'm sure you're aware of the fact that just because someone has the title software engineer and 10 years experience doesn't necessarily mean that everything's equal across the board. What's your approach to that when there is can be quite a big difference in terms of the skill set itself?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And as you said, just if you go just based off the title, there's a wide range in what the compensation is, but frankly, even what people do. And the way we address it is really through a combination, like I said, of our data and our products, where we are looking at and our services, where we're looking at not just the title, we are looking at an entire job description. We are looking at what we call compensable factors, right? So for example, you and I could both be software engineers, but if I have 15 years of experience, you have 5, I should get paid more because of what I do, right? But also in our industry, we find that certain people working on certain tech stacks make more than others just because of the demand in the industry and so on and so forth. It could be a location. So it's a bunch of different compensable factors that actually make a difference in your pay. And we take all of those into consideration. So we actually have a way for people to define job descriptions, but also for our B2C side for people to come in and give us more information about themselves. And the more information you give us, the more accurately we can tell you how much you get paid. But also as an employer, we use our data for you to be able to make that same slicing and dicing and go, hey, it's not just who I'm trying to hire, but what my job description looks like. What am I looking for? How many years of experience do I have? What skill sets am I looking for? What location am I looking to hire in? But we also have other offerings like Peer that will give people the ability to opt into a network. So you can not just look at those at a high level across companies, but you could say, I am a fintech company in a specialized space. So what do people like me pay people? Because there's so many factors that decide someone's compensation. And we're trying to include all of them into you to say, the more information we have about what you're trying to do, the better we can give you an estimate on what that job range looks like, if you will.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it's very interesting. It kind of leads on to, my next question. Obviously, being in the tech world, at the start of this year and the end of last year, we saw huge amounts of layoffs in the tech industry. In my opinion, I think some of that was related to compensation. I think you had people with relatively limited years experience being paid huge amounts of money. And I remember at the time questioning how sustainable it would be for someone with 2 years out of college making north of 300 grand a year. But working in the tech world, what was your impression of that? Do you think people overhired? And if so, what lessons can be learned from that?
I think you're spot on, or at least I am absolutely convinced that in so many ways, the tech world overhired. And I would say overhired in 2 different ways. One, like you said, is just the compensation. People were paying people for skill sets that they knew wouldn't scale, right? But they were all trying to compete in the same COVID market, and everyone was trying to scale it quickly because they thought there was an opportunity in the market for those products or services, and they were all fighting for the same talent pool. And really, in so many ways, it's an auction. They're just trying to outbid each other to get people, but not really in a sustainable way. I think the other thing also is that there were large sectors that really thought that the market out there was great for their business, and they hired people in so many ways. If you heard of the word blitz scaling or blitz failing, it's kind of the idea that you're all trying to grow really quickly, and you think you want to get there first, you want to get a large share of the talent pool. I think in some of the bigger organizations, that's what happened, right? Or in some cases, there was more money to be had in terms of funding, so people just hired to try and use up that money without really understanding what it would look like once you're out of the pandemic, both in terms of the market, but also the skill sets and kind of having your business be able to sustain that level of growth, that level of compensation. I think in so many ways, we are now paying the cost of it, right? Where lots of companies have realized that once that boom went away, they don't have enough revenues or market or even work to be able to sustain all the people that we hired at the compensation levels that they were hired at. 100%. And I think there's absolutely a lesson to be learned. But I think in like so many ways that lesson is not specific to just this particular market or how we overhire, right? It is just in terms of like sustainable growth overall. My firm belief is that before you grow quickly, and I have actually grown teams significantly at previous roles, you really have to make sure that besides the standard things that you want a company to have in terms of vision and cash flow and brand and marketing, you really being able to operationalize your vision, right? Making sure you're first optimizing your resources, you have established a process for how things work in the company. Onboarding is a big deal. So really first like making sure that you have your ducks lined up, so to speak, before you go out then and hire a bunch of people, because you want to make sure that when you have those people like come in, that you are hiring in the right place. So you're not creating a bottleneck somewhere else and these people are not productive. But also that if you hire a lot of people, you are able to hire them and still be able to onboard them effectively and still be able to have your company culture and be able to bring these people up to speed and productive at a pace that works for your business. I think there's a lot there that we can learn, but at the same time, it's not the first time we've learned that lesson, right? It's more how sticky will it be this time as opposed to last time.
Yeah, that's very true. The economic conditions, that they are just so cyclical. We had strong economic conditions for such a long period of time that I think people almost forgot the lessons of the last recession. I think the onboarding thing is really crucial because we've seen a lot of clients where they're just, I don't know if they have a certain headcount goal or so on and so forth. They are just, right, we have 50 million in funding and we need to get to 150 people within 12 months, no matter what the cost. And we've seen organizations that hire on one hand and lay off on another hand. And just, again, it's not that sort of sustainable scalability.
We interrupt this podcast for a quick 30-second introduction to Engtal, the host of Her Success. Engtal is a US-based staffing agency specializing in engineering and technology. We have an insatiable passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and part of our mission is to balance the diversity scales in our industry. We are so tied to this mission that we donate $1,000 from every diverse placement made to our very own nonprofit, Diversify the Future. We then use that money to fund scholarships for underrepresented groups of people to help them obtain a STEM degree. If you're an engineer or a tech professional looking for a new position, or maybe you're hiring for talent in this space and want a recruitment partner, please get in touch.
From what you've seen from an onboarding perspective, where have you seen that gotten right? What does good scalability look like from an onboarding perspective, making sure that people are comfortable, people are happy, they align with the values of the company, and they are someone that comes through the door and maybe they are going to work for the organization for 3 to 5 years rather than have a revolving door of talent?
Yeah, I think, even before onboarding, I think it does start with hiring the right person. I'll go out and say that not everyone who's right in one company is right in some other. Right? You need to make sure that you are hiring for the kind of person that you need, and beyond just your skill sets, looking at people who, for me, for example, hiring people who are pragmatic or flexible is important because it changes the constant, right? But again, that might not be for some other companies. So really looking at what and who you're hiring, and hiring the people that are more likely to succeed in the environment that you are in. But then also making sure that they have a great experience when they join. And my experience has been, even from my own personal experiences, when you hire someone who's experienced and who's skilled, you're hiring them from a place where they were highly productive, and they expect to get highly productive fairly quickly because that's their self-image. Yeah. And the sooner we can get them to a point where they're onboarded, they're effective, they're productive, is where you're most likely going to keep happy employees. There's enough research out there that says that with a lot of people, the first 90 days of your onboarding is where people decide this is a long-term place or not, because based on how their onboarding goes. And so really getting your onboarding experience in line. And by that, I mean making sure that you have the right tools and the resources for people to be able to use when they come in. You have the right documentation, you have the right onboarding process, you have paired them up with the right people so that as they have questions, especially in this remote world, it's a lot different hiring people and onboarding people in a remote world than it was when we were on the same office, where people could just walk over or you could go talk to people. So making sure that you build in some of those processes that will make that onboarding easier, whether it's assigning a buddy to someone, making sure that somebody's checking in on them, making sure you have the right documentation, you have enough documentation for them to be able to follow something along and self-start, if you will. So I think there's a lot there. But I think the other thing, as I talked about sustainable scaling, is, and you actually mentioned that as well, is a bunch of companies said we have 50 million, we need to hire a whole bunch of people in a short amount of time. You got to ask yourself if that is really where your sustainable number is, or you're trying to hire those people because there is a short-term opportunity. Are you hiring full-time people? Should you hire contractors? Should you do contract to hire? Really trying to understand how easily your business can scale and how easily your teams can scale. And then as you do that, really understanding the skill set that you need for the business that's growing, and then also the bottlenecks you might create if you only hire in one area versus the other. I think there's a lot that goes into it, as opposed to just trying to get talent into the door, and which is I think what we did a lot of in the past 2 or 3 years is just try and hire people as quickly as we could at whatever compensation that the market demanded, and we are seeing the cost of it now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's such a big difference between building a company and building a culture versus hiring skills, right? Hiring someone that can do a job for you. Sometimes can you outsource that to a third party? Could they, if you believe that you're only going to need that specific skill set for a 12, 18-month period, is that something you can outsource? Because I think a lot of people may look and say, if we hire someone for 18 months and they do a good job and they build this for us, and then at the end of the road, they either get laid off or they leave, that's fine. I think the impact it has on your culture and the company long-term is huge. And to your point, I interviewed someone for this podcast a few weeks ago, and they said almost exactly what you said. They said, as a leader, if you do nothing but hire great people and get them successful quickly, pretty much the rest of the business takes care of itself. Good people need to feel productive. They need to feel successful. They need to see the growth in front of them. If they don't, they will leave. And it's almost like a clock. As soon as they walk through the door, if you can get them productive and successful as soon as possible, you as a business leader are going to win from that. You're going to have more productive people quicker, and you're going to engage the really talented, ambitious, intelligent people that you bring through the door. If you do that, again, a lot of other things, and any other business challenges and things like that kind of takes care of themselves, because you've got this population of really happy, engaged, talented workers, essentially.
It's 100%, right? And it's also, to just also repeat what we just talked about, really understanding whether the people you're hiring is for the long term or if it's for the short term is so important, because you could get the same work done or the same productivity from a short-term contractor, a contract to hire versus a full-time person. But there is a cost to hiring a full-time person for a year or year and a half, and then laying them off, right? The cost is the morale of the team that you leave behind. But I think it's also when people see a lot of churn like that, they're never sure when it's their turn next.
Yeah.
And when there's that level of uncertainty, you find that the best people are the ones who leave the first, because they can find the jobs the easiest. And those are the people you do not want to leave. So I think there is a cost to the constant churn if you're not, if you're not being mindful of sustainable hiring.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. We obviously working in the recruitment world, but we hire a lot of grads. I'd say 70% of the people that we hire through a grad model. And there are so many companies out there that have the philosophy, right? We'll hire 10 grads knowing that 4 of them won't work out, 5 of them won't work out. And if we do that, the 5 that do work out will pay for the 5 that left the business. And while fiscally that may be the case in the short term, the long-term culture that you build is, it's just not as strong. I had a debate with someone, and our entire 2022 grad class still works for our organization a year on. I remember I was at a conference a few months ago and I had a conversation with someone and he almost laughed at me and said, like, good thing. The fact that you've retained that level of people, that number of people shows that you're doing it wrong. You need to be more ruthless. You need to cut more people. Fiscally, would we have made more money in that 12-month period had we cut the bottom 25% 6 months in? Yeah, probably. But I think the culture that we have now built, our new grad class started, and they can look at every single person that joined a year ago and they know they're still there and they're thriving and they're happy. That is invaluable. And fiscally, that, I believe, I hope that will pay dividends down the road. But I think it's crucial that people look at their business from that perspective and not simply about, okay, let's get as much productivity out of this person over a short period of time as we can. And then once that's over, the time's come for you to leave the company.
I've seen companies do that for sure. And I agree with you. I'm not sure that's being penny wise, pound foolish, if you will. Because in so many ways, if I'm an existing member of the team and I'm tasked with helping onboard these people, but I know that each time I have a group of 10 coming, at least 5 are going to make it, my incentive to onboard them is even less than it used to be. Because why would I invest so much of my time and effort into getting all these people onboarded if in the end only half of them are going to make it? And then it's a vicious cycle, because then you don't onboard them, but you don't invest enough to getting them up to speed, which means there's probably a greater percent that don't make the cut.
Exactly. It is like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And everyone has periods in their career where they don't do particularly well. I think it's inevitable that at some point in your career you're going to have a few months where, for whatever reason, you're not at peak performance. And if you believe that whenever that day comes, your career can end, then it's like being on a treadmill, kind of 24/7. And eventually you're going to have to get off. A couple of other questions. We're almost kind of out of time, which is crazy. I feel there's been a really good conversation. But a couple of final questions to wrap up. If you were to think back through your career, what do you think the biggest challenges that you personally have faced? And if you were to give advice to someone that's maybe listening to this podcast that is possibly facing the same thing, what would you say?
It's an interesting question, right? I think I kind of see it as two different threads. One is the challenge around the work I'm doing or was doing at the time, but the other is just the role that you are in. And in so many ways, I feel like the first time you step into a role that you've never done before, the expectations are different. And I think it's important to be able to make sure that you get clarity on what the expectations are from your role, but also give yourself some grace. In so many ways, imposter syndrome is a real thing. But at the same time, really understanding what you need to do, getting good feedback from people, I think is where I found the most benefit. Be open about what you do well. Be open about where trying to solicit feedback from the people around where you should improve, what you should do differently, what you should do better. But at the same time, I feel like in so many ways, a lot of people tend to second guess themselves. That leads to not making a decision, which can be probably more harmful than making one that you can then iterate on. Being really transparent to people about. I kind of see the other decisions I make, other kinds of things I do in the same agile way where we build software. You have to iterate. What I did or didn't 10 years ago doesn't work anymore. So how do you constantly keep learning? But I think what I found really useful is really being able to focus on the work and the expectation, kind of grow from there. I kind of joke about the fact that my first job was at a company where I was the only woman engineer. We joke about the fact that before I started there, they actually had a sign in the bathroom the day before I started saying, "Don't use it." There's actually a woman using it now, because it just wasn't a thing, right? Yeah. But I think to me the interesting thing was, even as kind of the only woman there, it never felt different to me. Right? It felt like we were still all just working as a team. I just happened to be the only woman, but there was nothing different in what we did or how we worked. We gave feedback back and forth, irrespective of who we were giving feedback to. We were very open about what we did well and what we didn't do well. and we grew, right? And I think in like so many ways, you can stop yourself and you can ask yourself, oh, do I want to be in this role? Do I want more women here? Do I want like something else there? But those are good, but I think you also need to focus on why you are there and kind of what you're trying to achieve and how you can get feedback and just constantly improve like everybody else.
That's a great point. I think, the kind of second guessing yourself and the imposter syndrome, I've done, a large number of these interviews with some phenomenally successful people, some real kind of absolute high flyers. And there's not a single person that didn't say that they have absolutely suffered from imposter syndrome. Not just they have, but they do to this day. They regularly kind of second guess themselves. And I think it's a very important message, particularly to our listeners. I certainly remember I always had aspirations of starting my own company and being a CEO, but I always worried, because of my own self-doubt, whether I would, kind of actually be able to do that. And when I heard a couple of CEOs that I thought were just the most inspirational, people out there saying, I still feel like that every day, I still feel, should I be here? Is this decision the right decision to make? Even though I might come across decisive and with perfect clarity of vision, that isn't the case. And it was a real eye-opener for me. And that's been such a common trend through the Her Success podcast is, just how much imposter syndrome there is, regardless of regardless of what fantastic things, you've achieved in your career, which I think is such a strong message. The final, question from me is, tell me something that you're excited about for the future, whether it's with Payscale and where you're looking to take the engineering team or anything else. What do you have on the horizons and what are you excited about?
So I think there's a lot there, right? Clearly, I think the domain I'm in is something that has always appealed to me. And I think there's so much there for the future in terms of really understanding how you pay people and why you pay them, really being able to drill into things like pay equity, really using the tools that are out there for us to be able to do better job descriptions, to really think about what the impact is of what we do, whether it's through generative AI, whether it's through just pay equity analysis, whether it's through different tools or data that help you understand how you hire the best people and kind of, also acknowledging that it's not just compensation, it's everything else that attracts people. So really being able to break that down into your culture, your compensation, your benefits, all of those, right? And really understand what we do. And I think as we also look at what we do, there's so much potential in terms of using the other technology that's out there, the data that's out there for us to be able to make better decisions, but also help companies give those companies insight into what their operations look like. I think in so many ways, the amount of pay transparency laws that are out there that are now kind of going from country to country, state to state, I think there's going to be a greater and greater push for pay transparency, and that by definition means companies need to be able to look inwards, look at how they pay people, and actually be able to talk to how they pay people, not just pay people equitably, but also be able to explain their compensation philosophy to people, right? And I think that's where the industry is going. I think there's a lot of potential there, but I think it's also exciting because it does mean that if you think back 20 years ago when I was working as an engineer, you had no clue how much somebody else got paid or why you got paid a particular way. You just did, and that was it, right? But I think it's not just pay transparency in terms of whether you're getting paid equitably or not. But I think it's even being able to look further and say, what do I need to do to grow, to get paid differently, right? What skills do I need? What experience do I need? All of those. So you can, in so many ways, as a young professional, you can map out that career and look at how you need to grow, where you need to grow, so you can achieve whatever it is that's important to you, wherever you need to go. I think that is such a powerful message for people who start their careers and really are trying to figure out how they get to wherever their dream is, wherever their goal is.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think my own journey, I had, I had no idea career paths that were available. The advice that I got from my dad was I should probably join the army. And if anyone had told me, if you get this education and you get this experience by this age, you could be making this, I think it would have really shaped how I approached my career very, very differently. So I think it's an incredible mission that your company has. I think it will help, obviously, so many individuals, but also it'll help so many companies be stronger and more equitable. And, the commercial value to getting compensation right has to be huge for these organizations. Anyway, that is all what we have time for today. But Anuja, thank you so much. I think we covered some really great topics. I've really, really enjoyed having the conversation, and I really, really appreciate your time.
Thanks. You too. Like I said, this is something that's close to my heart. I can talk about it for hours, but I really appreciate the time you've taken.
Excellent. Well, thank you, guys. I hope everyone enjoyed the podcast, and listen in next week.
Thank you so much for listening to today's Her Success podcast, brought to you by Equitable. We hope you found this episode instructive, educational, and inspiring. Don't forget to tune in next week.